here. Before I turn this over to Gordon, there's been lots of talk. This is Thursday night for Aries stuff, and there's been a lot of talk about the Aries Connect. And so I talked to Scott. What's his last name? Anyway, yes, thank you. And he's going to write up an instruction sheet for us. All he's going to send it to me. We're going to test run it to allow us to download for those who've been using Aries Connect, download the stuff from that. There's kind of a little trick to doing it. You have to combine a couple of files, but he'll walk us through it with the instructions, and I'll get it out to all of you as soon as we make sure it works right. Okay, normally I go through a little spiel telling people how to rename themselves and all that. I think most of you have been around enough now, we don't have to worry about that too much. Almost everybody's did that. So Gordon, if you're ready, I think I'm just going to turn it over to you and let her roll.
Okay, let's see if I can make this work.
Well, they're still popping in like crazy.
Okay, does that screen show?
Yeah, it looks great.
I'm not sure how to see the chat room, so.
No, we'll have to watch the chat for you.
Yeah. Give me a second. I may want to fiddle with this right-hand thing. Ah, good. Now I can see most of my screen. Okay, so I was asked to give a little talk about Homeland Security Exercise Evaluation Program. My view of that is it's a way to grow and strengthen amateur radio groups. This is a picture of a fairly famous guy who's in our local group and has helped us out a good bit in one of our exercises. There it worked. So first, a disclaimer. I'm relatively recent to this, only 5 years or so. I had a very active career as a physician, and I also flew airplanes and learned how to shoot rifles and a bunch of other stuff. So I'm probably more recent to some of this stuff than some of y'all. So some of you may have a much wider range of experience, and if I say something stupid, you can speak up and correct it or gently point out a better way to do it, and add your input to it. So my knowledge could be quite parochial since I live in Florida and just do the best I can with what I know down here. This URL link, I've tried to prepare a bunch of resources for anybody who wants to go further with this. And there's access to quite a few documents through that link. If someone could type that into chat for other people, I'm not sure if I know how to do that.
It's in there now.
Cool, thank you. So it's got a table of URLs, and I provided some blank documents, some boilerplate documents that will make your life far easier if you want to write up an exercise in the standard professional way. And since I'm cheap, I just always use LibreOffice Productivity Suite, so you'll find documents in LibreOffice format, but generally Microsoft Word will handle that. There's a PDF of pretty close to the current version of this talk, and much other stuff, and links to government documents and training sessions and anything that I thought would be good, I stuck in that document. So here's what I'm going to try to cover. Try to cover why you want to be engaged in the National Response Framework, which some of you know a lot more about than I. The importance of exercises in developing a solid group, and key to that is doing things their way. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. The HSEEP format is their way. The first part of that is to find which FEMA core capabilities you're going to attack. We're going to show you those. Then you define some related objectives, which is sort of goals. Construct a challenging and a fun exercise. If it's not fun, people aren't going to join in. Then when you're done, you evaluate, write it all up the right way, and if you do this right, it allows good documentation of the growth and capabilities of your group over time. And I think it will aid you quite a bit in trying to increase your engagement with your local response systems. Okay, so my first question is your group really relevant? Well, obviously in that current situation, that guy or gal, you can't know which it is a very relevant person to that situation. They appear to be trained, they appear to be equipped, they're probably part of an engaged group, and they're exactly who you need for that situation with the backup and the other people involved that they will need with to deal with that situation. But how about our groups? When there is a disaster, who steps up to the plate? Who is in charge? Well, typically, in my experience, it's the local legal authorities. That would be the emergency management department, fire, police, basically county or city or other government employees. Well, so my first question was, do most counties have an emergency management department? And the answer I discovered is yes. In a 2006 survey carried out by University of Georgia researchers, more than 75% of the responding counties have a separate emergency management department. So for most of us, that's where we're going to be going. But some of you might be going to a different agency, and there are agencies beyond just the government. There are also non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that you might be trying to fit with as well. But you got to fit in. If you're not involved, well, that's probably going to mean that you're not going to get tapped because they don't know you. They're not going to suddenly magically develop relationships with you. So the range of engagement of amateur radio and other groups ranges from having been thrown out, that's not a happy story, to being heavily engaged with local authorities. In one of our counties, Nassau County, Florida, the volunteers actually provide a significant portion of the working force at their local emergency management department, which is kind of amazing. I mean, it's really a fantastic public-private collaborative working agreement. We don't do quite that in my county, but we're very much held in very high esteem. And 5 years ago, that was not the case. We were getting close to getting. My thing says someone raised their hand. We want to. Is there a question?
It was a mistake.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so again, don't.
I got a quick question. Can you release permission so we could tape this if we wanted to?
Yeah, we can give you that permission. I'm
Thank you.
taping it and I will send it out to everybody though.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
Sure. Don't overlook non-governmental organizations. For instance, I'm a part of Florida Baptist Disaster Relief, and hams there were non-existent. And then all of a sudden they had a come to Jesus moment. It's a faith-based group. They were stuck in Hurricane Michael with zero communications, and they needed to order. They order their food by the pallet to feed 10 to 15 to 50,000 people a day. And we were able to get some hams to them to teach them how to turn on radios they already actually had but had not been using. But if you're not engaged, it's unlikely you'll be called upon. In that instance, that NGO, for some reason or other, knew me, and I got a phone call saying, "Can you help? We are stuck in Panama City, and we can't reach our team there." And I had actually WinLink capability to reach a team from my county who were there, and in coordination with the state section emergency coordinator, we were able to get our team there and help them out. If you don't have connections, you're not going to get called. So how do you get more engaged? Okay, well, this is my view. There could be better ones. You need to first be viewed as more of a benefit than a problem. You need to be viewed as flexible volunteers rather than loose cannon know-it-alls who walk in and declare that they're in charge. That's not going to be the case. The more we rub shoulders with these people, the more we understand their jobs and they understand our weaknesses and strengths, and better for you. Develop a history of working relationships with the officials who actually do have command of the situation in your county or your state or whatever. Go to the meetings. Ask how you can help. Respond to the requests. Do what they ask. People in my county were stunned because they would send something out and in 24 hours it was done or replied to. The things they asked, we did. That developed a lot of relationships. The important thing that this talk goes to is developing real tested abilities, not just, we think we can do this, but ways to demonstrate you can and you do these kind of things. Leland Gallup, who's the retired judge who's sitting in the front seat of that photograph, has a saying that you've got to have face time with the authorities. So every Wednesday, he's down there working those stations there. It's not the entire station, but we're checking into shares nets, SAR nets, every net we can. We test every piece of gear. We have a checkoff sheet where we document that. And this got noticed. We have an acting emergency manager, and that person in a meeting with me commented that they were not at all impressed with fancy communication systems because they were convinced that our systems would work when they were called upon, and they were not sure of other systems. And the reason was they saw us testing our equipment, our procedures, our group all the time. And that was what they were looking for, was a group of people who were always testing, always checking. Build face time with your people that you're going to serve. And you're going to want that because there's going to be friction when things go wrong. And friction's a lot more easily lubricated when they know you and they know that you mean well. Now, I can't guarantee that all of these ideas are going to get your volunteers called on, but I think it will make it much more likely. And remember, governments are in the business of providing emergency services. They get paid to do that. They're professionals at that. They practice for that. They may or not be interested in volunteer assistance, which may or may not be helpful to them. The situation with a non-governmental organization may be very different. They may not have the budget for those kind of professional expertise. They may be desperately looking for volunteers like we are in Florida Baptist Disaster Relief. And they're very open to taking you in and training you and trying to fit you into a niche. So, find where you fit and then bloom where you get planted. That'd be my suggestion. Okay, so exercises, in my view, are key to having a solid group. I don't think you really know what you've got until you test it. You may think you've got it, and it doesn't work. You don't know who's going to show up. And when people don't show up, they're no good at all to you. You don't know what they're going to bring. They may bring all the wrong stuff, or what they bring may be broken. You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know how they're going to respond. So if you hold exercises, people get to rub shoulders, plug wires together, figure out problems together, get used to each other, and it works a whole lot better. We had some unwanted friction in one hurricane, and it was just because nobody knew each other. They stumbled into each other, and first impression didn't go well, and it caused problems. And it took us almost a year to get some of that solved. One person thought that we were magically going around the state because they couldn't understand how we were communicating. And it was all because of miscommunications. So how does this relate to tonight's topic? Homeland Security Exercise Evaluation Program, which is what that document on the right is all about. Well, the Homeland Security Exercise Evaluation Program is well known to the emergency managers. They know this stuff. They have to do this stuff. They may not like it, they may not be good at it, but they're familiar with it. If you participate in this kind of a program, you're going to be aligned with the goals of your local authorities. It's going to help you more accurately detect the status of your teams. It will allow you to track your improvement over time somewhat. It'll give much more understanding to your local authorities of what you're really up to. And in my opinion, a much better chance that you'll be involved in helping if there is a real need. It's not a panacea, but I think it'll help you to become better engaged. And basically, we're not reinventing the wheel. This has already been done. We just do it their way. And the goal here is interoperability. As much as possible, you want to talk their language, speak their language, work with their teams, do things their way, so that you fit in instead of causing a problem. Okay, so most important take home on the Homeland Security Exercise Evaluation Program, HSEEP is what I'm told it's called, is that it will focus your efforts with your group towards measured solid growth. And it will do that in areas that will be valued by emergency management instead of being ignored. I have here the covers of two different after action reports. The one on the left is a statewide communications exercise done in South Carolina. The one on the right was a tabletop exercise done in North Dakota. Both involved some ham radio involvement, which are radio capabilities and options mentioned in both these documents. If you are doing the HSEEP program, you're going to be holding those kinds of exercises. And in our case, in our county, it impressed the heck out of the emergency management group. They were stunned at what we were doing, and it made for a much stronger working relationship. Okay, so where do we start? So the first thing with HSEEP is you need to understand that FEMA has mission areas: prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. And generally, we ham radio operators are in the response area. We could be in others, but it's usually the early part is when communications are busted, when we might be needed. And then other people come in and fix the communications a lot of times in the period of a week or two, or maybe days. And we're less necessary. So our portion in this a lot of times is response. Well, what does FEMA do in response? Well, they have some core capabilities that are part of their response that they want strengthened in every community and every state: planning, public information warning, operational coordination, infrastructure systems, transportation, environmental response, fatality management. Somebody's got to deal with the dead bodies, fire management, logistics, mass care services. That's where the shelters are. Mass search and rescue, when they've got to figure out who's alive and dead. Security protection, operational communications. That's what I think is communicating between different members of their response team. Public health, situational awareness. If you'll look at these, there's a need for communications at almost every single one of these. So you've got your group potentially has a role all throughout the core capabilities. That may not be the case right now in your county, but they may not realize that you could be of assistance in lots of these different core capabilities. So for right now, your group may already be involved in support in some number of these core capabilities. It may be that you're doing shelter communications. It may be that you're doing search and rescue, something else, mass care services. If you're involved with an NGO, Baptist Disaster Relief, they may have different core capabilities. But I want you to think about the larger future. A lot of times people only look at the catastrophes that are common or that they've seen happen, but your emergency manager is likely thinking about much larger possibilities. They have probably done a threat and hazard identification and risk assessment, THERA, and about their community, and they know that there are other things that they might need to be ready for. And they may have a multi-year training program. You might want to point out and be aware that your group could be used in larger ways than what you're being used for now. And to facilitate that, you might want to orient your training towards a larger picture than just the standard stuff that everybody has done for years. And that would help your group grow. So think go beyond your past history. Don't limit your training. When the Nashville 911 system went down and took down a good bit of AT&T's vaunted FirstNet and some other systems that I'm not supposed to talk about, that opened up some eyes. People began to realize that stuff they were depending on might not be so reliable. It might have some pretty amazing vulnerabilities. So the result is discuss with your emergency management when you're able to expanded roles for your volunteers in larger disasters and train in the areas where they see possibilities. They may not realize your capabilities. You may not realize your capabilities. If you work together, you may find that you can be of assistance in larger areas. Once you've figured out what your core capabilities, that you're going to work in, for instance, operational coordination, fire management and suppression, mass care services, then you're going to think what your objectives are in those core capabilities, specific things that you want to be able to get accomplished if that core capability is called upon. I'm going to get a little more into this in the future and a little later in this talk, but you might need to link county, city, university, EOCs. You might need to assess fire departments when their trunk radio system went kaput. From shelters, mass care services, objective status reports. Our group has built a shelter Wi-Fi information system that can leverage cell phones and give people mass information quickly, directly from our EOC. Nobody knew we had done that. I finally got the chance to explain that to them, and they were amazed. You may want to be involved in traditional ham radio communications outbound of a disaster area to loved ones. We're okay, here's where we are, you can't reach us, don't try, we'll get back in touch. There's a lot of things that you might have as your objectives. Your group has to pick those. You may want to discuss that with your emergency manager to do that. Make it fun. People have a lot of needs. There's Maslow triad of needs of people. They want to be significant. They don't want to waste their time on trivia. They want to be appreciated. Pick disaster scenarios that are actually based on real situations. Make the exercise for your people as real as it could be. There are a lot of ways you can make it more real. You could get a map of the high pressure gas lines. And those things do blow up. I read of a Boy Scout troop that were incinerated when the line underneath their camping site went kaput. Seek as much involvement with local agencies and authorities as possible. Build that interoperability. We did some work with the fire department in our area who are part of a statewide communication system, and it was eye-opening. Those guys were so good. They just trounced us in a lot of ways. It was great for both teams to see what the other team could do. They also discovered some problems with their repeater system, so it was great for them too. If you work alongside people in exercises where the pressure isn't as great, it's going to make it a lot better when you're thrown in the middle of a real disaster. So this is a map of the high pressure gas lines. We did an exercise where we theorized that the gas line that's right beside the freeway in my city blew up. But it did it in a time of extreme cold, and that meant that the power went down because the power system may depend on natural gas, and meanwhile people didn't have heat, and so the shelters were overloaded, and boy, we ginned up a great disaster scenario just off of that. You may want to look into where the electrical power lines are that feed your community. Where are there chemical plants that may blow up, refineries, power stations, something about the trunk radio systems and their vulnerabilities and internet vulnerabilities after what we saw in Nashville. So the sky's the limit for coming up with what could go wrong. I think I skipped this slide. Give me a second. Okay, now I want to talk about objectives, because once you start doing those objectives, we want this to be a real objective that's what they call SMART. It needs to be specific. So it says exactly what we want done. It needs to be measurable. So we can actually say, you did it, you didn't do it, you did this much of it. We're not doing pats on the back, we're doing objective measurements. It needs to be something that can be done, achievable. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be time-oriented. You don't have 3 weeks to get the job done in a disaster, and you don't have that in our exercises either. We don't make our messages up on the fly. We create the whole exercise so that messages are moved by ham radio operators. Very rarely are they created by ham radio operators. So we try to mimic the same situation they would see in a real problem. They're not running the show. They're the communicators for the show. Okay, so some skills and assets that you might wish to develop and test with your objectives. We suggest your people need to be deployable. When we started, we had no go boxes. Nobody could move. They were all stuck at home. Well, that doesn't do a lot of good if we need you over there. So you may want to develop the ability to not only move, but to be sustainable when you get there. I can tell you some funny stories about a professional group that didn't think about toilets when they moved, and that caused some issues. Voice messaging, you need to be able to move formal or informal messages. If you can't move formal messages, what you ask for may never happen. We've got some real sad stories about how that happened in a real hurricane here in Florida. Digital messaging, you may be using narrowband EMS, you may be using WinLink. We are now prototyping a way to use JSA federal nets. Alternative electrical power, because that's one of the things that may not exist. You may want to interface to ComEls. That was a real issue in some of our hurricanes because nobody knew where the ComEl was. No way to interface to them. That's got to be solved. And leadership didn't somewhat drop the ball on that one. Rapid antenna deployment, HF, VHF, UHF, satellite, whatever it is you're planning to use, and your people make it work, and they make another one work when the first one's busted. Shares capability, shelter communications, and status systems. Are your people background checked? In Florida, you can't get into a shelter if you haven't been background checked. So these are skills and assets that you may want to build into your exercises. You got to crawl before you can walk, and you got to walk before you can run. You'll scare the dickens out of your people if you start them off with a full-scale exercise. So we sort of start with very small things, tabletops, where we say, well, what would we do? And how would we do it? And what should we do? And then you can move on to drills. Then you can move into functional exercises and what we call deployment exercises. It's hard for us to get other agencies or multiple jurisdictions. Sometimes we can do that, and we really meet the definition of full scale, but move yourself slowly towards full scale exercises. But that's not that big a deal, because if you just send 4 teams out in 4 directions in your county, that's a deployment. You just did a real deployment exercise. One of the exercises we did, we moved our entire teams 60 miles west of us to a port city and carried out an exercise where none of us were at home. Your group will expand their assets and their skills to match what you do in your exercises. So we hold, usually before one of our big exercises, we've all got new people. We will hold a tabletop, but it's not a tabletop in the FEMA definition because we bring real radios. We're not just talking, we're using radios. We're all in one building, we're in different rooms, and people are able to solve their issues with sneakerware. They just walk over and say, did you get that message? What did I do wrong? This is very popular with our groups. And it allows us, a lot of the learning goes on during the preparatory tabletop exercise. And then we move to the real deployment exercise with or without additional agencies. Sometimes the other agencies have needs to do their exercises. They'd love to have you come along. Oh, but, could we partner on this? So you'll have to just investigate. Try to get your emergency management group involved as much as possible, directing you as much as you can get them to. Ours has been very standoffish. They didn't really know what we were, but you'll see some tricks we did to get them to understand us better. If you can write an exercise plan, that's great. FEMA's got a lot of things on how to do it. It's sort of like way overcomplicated, I think. But at the very least, you can write up an ICS 201. It's a nice document. It's got the who, where, what, when, where, why, what kind of stuff all in one document. You're going to need that same stuff anyway, so why not fill the thing in? My emergency manager was very happy as long as I put up at the top it was for the Alachua County Aries group. They didn't care as long as it just didn't say it was for Alachua County. As long as it was limited to our group, they were amazed and happy that we were being so organized. Got to know your core capabilities and your objectives. That's key. Then you can write your exercise documents. Now, what I'm giving you tonight is sort of a mini version of IS 139. And there's 2 independent study courses you're going to want to go do. One of them is IS 120, and the other is IS 139. And those will give you, a lot of information about how to do this, more than I can in this little talk. I've also written up a couple of chapters, and in the material that I put on the web for you, you'll find a lot of documentation about that. Okay, so when you write an exercise, you don't just give away all the marbles in what you put down. You just get them started and send out the teams and da-da-da-da. And then you start adding injects. things that change, that get injected into the exercise that nobody knew you were going to do. So you throw in problems, issues, equipment failures. I've created people who just showed up on the air and caused problems on purpose. Unexpected incoming messages or stations. You may declare that certain radios, antennas, repeaters are all dead. You could even declare riots, that sites are unsafe. You have lots of ways to get index into your exercise. One that I'm pretty familiar with is just using sealed envelopes. So there's 3 sessions to my exercise. You open the first envelope when you get to the deployment site. You open the second envelope at session 2. You open the third envelope at session 3. Each group has different envelopes. Nobody knows what else is happening with other people. It gets scary. In our first exercise, people had never realized that teams could disappear. And all of a sudden, a team just disappeared. Well, they didn't know if they killed or what. They never thought of that before. So all of a sudden, doing roll call every so often, just checking on the different teams took on a whole lot more importance and was a lot better attended to. You can also have monitors. You can inject people into that's the wrong word. You can place people into your different teams who are given the authority to make independent decisions. So they appear to be a county employee, and they will tell people to do such and such and such and such. And then the hams just take care of it. So it's as if you've created a county shelter manager or something like that. Here's an example of a sealed envelope. The person would open up the envelope at the appointed time, and it says, you've just been handed the following message to transmit to whoever's the state proxy for your state Department of Emergency Management. We want it delivered on an ICS 213, and oh, by the way, your generator just blew up, which took down your existing HF antenna. You got to deal with it, find a way to get that message out. Here's the message. It needs to go to State Emergency Manager Sue Smith. It's from Jim Jones of whatever your county is. 3 patients positive for meningitis at shelter number 19, hospital damaged, emergently transferring. It just goes on and on and on. I forgot to put in there, you'd stick in the words, this is an exercise frequently in this message. But they open this up and it just gives them a whole new job to do. You can do the same thing by radio-based index. You can just come onto your command net and give them the information. This is an exercise. A tornado's just leveled the Emergency Operations Center. The incident commander has directed Comm Unit 4 to move immediately to the front lawn of what's left of the EOC building, create new VHF, HF radio communications, including voice and digital on emergency power, advise as soon as any communications are possible. This is an exercise. You don't want to scare people who are listening on the frequency. So if you create injects, you're going to make your exercise a lot more fun for the people because they have no idea what you've got up your sleeve. Be sneaky about it and don't let anybody know what you're going to do. When you read through IS 139, it's going to teach you about a master scenario event list, MSEL. It's basically a script. It says everything that's going to happen, who's going to do it, who it's going to go to, and what this expected response is. It's kind of tedious to write these things up, but it allows you to much better follow what's going on. Because when you're the exercise, when you're the person executing the exercise, you've got 3 or 4 radios going constantly in front of you, listening to every frequency. This will keep you on track and you can check off what got done and what didn't get done. Your evaluators may want to have this as well, and then they can tell what is likely to, what's supposed to happen next. They can see if it got done or if it failed. In order to create these kinds of things, you're going to have to think through every little part of your exercise and what should be happening when. You're going to forget all that, so writing it down will make it a lot easier. This is our group deployed 60 miles away from home, and they're operating a microwave radio station on the shores of the river, which theoretically had risen above its banks and flooded the whole town. The way I got our emergency manager to be involved was I asked them to be an evaluator. Come be our evaluator, and that person was gracious enough to do that. They had never seen anybody do the stuff that we were doing. The lady who's in that picture was busy moving digital messages by WinLink, and the gentleman who was the evaluator, he'd never seen that done. had no idea how that was being done. You're moving telegrams. How are you doing that? And that set off a series of events. Because he was so impressed at what we were doing, he arranged for us to be able to teach a license class in the county building. He arranged for the second in command of our police force to attend because he knew that person wanted to get back their teenage years ham radio license. That person did get back their radio license, subsequently got back their general class license, is currently working on their extra class license. And that person, realizing what our group could do for our county, steered $1/8 of $1 million into radio assets for our ability to serve the county. So that one change moved $125,000 and got our group where we really fit with the county now. In a recent exercise, I asked my emergency manager, who turned out to be a master exercise practitioner, there's another word for it, but anyway, he had a lot of degrees after his name. And I wanted to ask him, would he please review my exercise? And he was so stunned at what we had written. He said, you're missing this. I want you to write out a full exercise plan. I had an ICS 201, but he wanted an X plan. This is the first time I'd ever done that. But I wrote one up for him, turned it around, had it to him the next day, 25 pages long. He couldn't believe that a citizen had done this overnight. He took his entire department and said, you're going to be this man's evaluators. He needs evaluators. You're going to do it. Okay, well, that guy took a better job in Colorado. You guys in Colorado have a really good guy in your state. But our EM department, from being our evaluators in that exercise, they got to see everything that we can do, good, the bad, the warts, everything. They understand basically what we can do now. So that helped our engagement with them way better. As I said before, you're not the creators of messages. We are just the transport layer and all this stuff. We're not the application layer, we're the transport layer. So try not to have your hams create the messaging. Try to have messaging handed to them or created on the fly by monitors of people you've designated to be management. This does require a lot of planning on your part, but it means that you will know what should have happened. In one of my first exercises, I probably had too many messages. I had 75 of them, and only about 50% got through. But I could tell them that because I knew what should have gotten through, and we could document. In your exercise, things will fall apart. In our first exercise, we almost had a fist fight. You could hear the fighting over the microphone as two people scrambled for the mic, trying to get it away from each other. The exact details of that do not show up in the after action report, but we did deal with it. We had complete screw ups of formal messages. We had formal messages that were transferred as one-line synopsis. We had equipment issues, we had personality issues, we had understanding issues. When things aren't working right, that means you've discovered where you've got weaknesses, and that's where learning really starts. So expect things to fall apart. That's normal. Plan for evaluation. The more you can measure your success and your failure, if you can get real human evaluators, this is a way that I've always got cynics to come evaluate our group, and they become convinced, oh my gosh, these guys are better than I thought. They're not perfect, but they're useful. It allows you to be very open about your strengths and weaknesses. It's just really developed a lot more engagement. When you're done, you want to have what's called a hot wash, a session where everybody who was involved comes together and they talk through what they felt, what they learned, what happened. I'm usually not the right guy to be the moderator because I'm usually emotionally involved. It was my exercise. I can't believe Team A screwed up so badly. What was Team C's leader doing? I'm all like emotionally involved. So I try to get a non-involved person to be the moderator. I'm blanking on his name, but I had a whiz from Ohio down running one of our exercises, and he's just fantastic at this. He manages to keep everybody cool, and he gets information out of them. And then have someone write down what you learned from these people as it's coming out of their mouths. Write down what they said. What was their problem? What was their feeling? What was their plan? Then you want to write up some form of an after-action report improvement plan. Okay, so if you use the HSEEP template, which I'm giving you a boilerplate, fill in the blank template in the materials that I provided for you, it's going to be very impressive. Your emergency manager is going to be stunned at what you create, but you don't have to do that. What you really have to do is just be objective. This is not the time to be patting yourself on the back. This is the time to list what you did good, what your group did badly, where your problems are, what you're going to do to fix it. Distinct plans to fix every failure, and then you got to keep track of those. We had 36 failures in our first exercise, and almost all of them we dealt with. Now, they may show up again. If you keep knocking those problems down, the number of your problems are going to go down, down, down across the years. And your group has become more and more solid. So I really encourage people to do a good after-action report, a good improvement plan. If you can use the HSEEP template, it's going to do wonders for your group. The version that I give you in the documents that I provided you is ready to be published on Amazon. It's in an Amazon template. And if you know how to go through a few simple steps, you can actually have it published as a book, which is how we publish all of ours. And then we carry those back and we hand them out to the emergency management department, the fire department, the police chiefs, anybody we need to explain, here's what our group is capable of. They look at that document and they're stunned. This is better than what we do. You guys are just doing a great job. So most counties have a very hard time doing a real deployment exercise. They can't get people out of their jobs. They're needed. And it's expensive. But we ham radio operators, we can do real deployment exercises. And a lot of our people are volunteers. So it doesn't cost us anything to do it. So we can carry out exercises that are just stunning in their minds. Now the HSEEP system is kind of a circle, just like the planning P in the incident response incident command system. You first plan for improvement in your group and you train for that improvement. Then you design an exercise to test those capabilities, conduct that exercise, evaluate that exercise. Then you're writing down what is my plan for the next improvement, and you just keep running this circle year after year after year. If you're really slick, you'll have a multi-year training plan. I had one once and I'm kind of behind on that now. But this is the exercise cycle. Okay, so that's what we've covered. I talked about why you need to be engaged in the response framework. And if you're not engaged in that response framework, you're unlikely to be utilized. And I think that's a real problem in amateur radio. We got a lot of great people out there who are very skilled, but they're not engaged. You need exercises in order to test and solidify your group. I recommend you do it their way. Use the HSEEP format. Define your FEMA core capabilities that your team wants, in your county wants you to do. Define the related objectives, specific things that you want to have everybody able to do or have your team be able to pull off. Construct a challenging and fun exercise. Start small. It can be a tabletop, it can be a functional drill, and then work your way up. Evaluate whatever you did. The tabletop, write it up. Write everything you up, and then you can go back to it the next time. Oh, we were weak here, so I need to stress that in the next exercise. Allows documentation of your growth over time. If you read through our exercises, you can see we're getting better and better and better. Okay, so again, the resources, I stuck under a PDF. Notice the little letters, it's case sensitive, qsl.net/little letters, NF4RC/big letters, HSEEP.pdf. And that's got just a ton of information for you. Let me see if I can get to that. Oh, here, if I just click this, I think it'll go there. This is that document, and it's just got just a ton of resources for you, including a complete blank exercise write-up. Here's some pictures of some books. This is a shameless plug. The reason we publish books is so other people can see what we've done and they can laugh at it. They can take it and show it to other people and say, gee, this is what we can do. So I'm going to see if this works. That downloaded a boilerplate document. And then I'm going to open that. And then here, let me zoom that in just a little bit. Zoom that up 100%. This is a boilerplate document for creating your own HSEEP document, writing up your group. And I suggest you put lots of pictures in. You're going to list what your exercise objectives were. I stuck some of ours in, but we had a map of where to go. Pick more pictures. Your initial task, your organizational setup, and your injects. Here I have just a couple of examples of what injects were. Some tables of results. You just erase this stuff and stick your stuff in, and you're ready to go to town with your entire write-up. You don't have to use that, but you can use that. Okay, that's it. And now I think I'm ready to accept any questions, if people have questions.
Gordon, this is David King, WI7DK in Wyoming. I'm a county emergency management coordinator and also HAM. One thing, all EM personnel that are paid in full or partially funded with federal grants are required to participate in 3 to 5 exercises each year. And these can be tabletops, these can be functional or full scale. There's about 5 to 7 different types of exercises that will qualify. But each one has to have an after action report or improvement plan prepared afterwards. The EMs do not have to create or run the exercise. They have to participate and be in that after action report or improvement plan. So if your SECs, anybody else is doing an exercise and they prepare an HSEEP compliant AARIP afterwards, and that coordinator got to participate, it's bonus points for them. So keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be the emergency manager's exercise. They just have to participate. So if you learn how to do an AARIP, that kind of stuff, and then one gets done and gets filed, that is big brownie points on your part.
Well, thank you, David. Appreciate you jumping in there. To avoid people just jumping on top of each other, doubling with the, try to raise your hand or put your questions in chat. I don't see hands raised. To raise your hand down at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you will see an icon that says reactions. You click on that and you'll see a thing for raise hand. That will raise your hand and we'll notice it and call upon you. Okay, with all that out of the way, Barry, do you see anything in chat?
Just one question I think Gordon will appreciate from Tom Horn. If you need a meal, the Red Cross has bologna sandwiches. The Salvation Army has edible food. The Baptists have the best food available. And
Now that's survival plans.
yes, that's true. And I think your friends at the Baptist group will appreciate that.
Yeah, I've helped cook some of that food.
Yep.
It's hard work, I can tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But if your team's been there for 3 days, you know, and they're starting to lag, if you can connect them with some of that Baptist food, it's going to cheer them right up.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Again, I'm going to ask you to hold your hand up, not just to jump in there. It prevents us from doubling. Zake.
Otherwise, that we have no real questions in chat, just a lot of people thanking you for a great presentation. And there's
Okay.
interest in making Go Kits, and I told the people that we'll be having a presentation on Go Kits down the road.
Okay, sounds good. They're clicking on the wrong raise hand, so you might watch the gallery. We have Tom, your hand's up. Did you want to say anything, something more?
Yeah, I did. For exercises, try and insist, if you possibly can, for a deployment exercise, that the participants bring their sustainment with them, because they're not going to get used to doing that until you have them do it. And some of them are awful shocked that they can bring the best radio stuff in the world, but if they didn't bring sustainment with them, they're not going to be able to operate it for too long. And that includes enough water and all the other things they need. If they can't do their own sustainment, they become part of the problem. That's all I needed to say.
Okay, well, thank you. Zeke, you had something there? Zeke, Z-E-K-E, I don't have a call sign or location on you. You have your hand up? Well, Zeke, I'm gonna lower your hand and then raise it again when you're ready to go there. Okay, your hand's lowered. Anybody else? Do you see anything, Barry?
Nope, nothing else.
Okay.
I have one more, let's see. Oh, down the road. That means a couple of weeks from now, I'm not sure the exact date, but we're planning a presentation on what goes into a Go Kit, how to build a Go Kit, etc. That's what down the road means.
You might ask people how many have ever been in an HSEEP compliant exercise. And then you might ask how many are willing to try to move their group to doing this kind of stuff.
Comments, people?
Raise your hand or put something in the chat. Okay, Fred, go ahead, get your hand up. Key in for QBZ. You're muted. Push your space bar or unmute yourself. There you go.
So what was the question, Barry?
If you've ever been in an
I mean,
HSEEP,
I've been a part of these exercises. What's the question?
Go ahead,
I
Gordon.
understand that. Say again.
Go ahead, ask your question again. Gordon?
Oh, I'm curious how many people have been involved in an HSEEP compliant exercise, or how many people are willing to help their group begin to hold them?
There are 3 raised hands now, so.
Okay, Fred, you're on.
Yeah, and we do exercises every year. The COVID situation has been a problem this year, but we're looking to restart.
Are your exercises HSEEP compliant?
Short answer is no. We're Oxcom.
Okay, well, Oxcom should be using HSEEP compliant exercises.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Okay, good.
Okay.
It's just a question of the semantics and the reporting that goes with it. But I think the earlier comments coming out of Wyoming really get to the point.
Okay, Zeke, are you
Yes.
with us?
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Oh, thank you very much. I would really love to have a copy of this whole video. We have a new young man who took over as our local EMA. He's very young. He is amiable. He thinks a lot of us, but I would like to work with him along with my Aries assistants to work with him and show him we're not trying to, put something out in there he knows nothing about, but work with him and show him what we would like to do and let him fit in or we fit in with him.
Okay, well, to everybody, to Zeke and everybody else out there, on every presentation, I record it, and then I send out a follow-up email, usually the next day, that has a link to the video, a link to the documents, a link to everything that's participated here. And it's also downloadable, so if you want to use it for your clubs or your Aries groups or whatever, you can. So that will follow. I'll get that done out there tomorrow morning sometime.
Okay, I appreciate that because we're here on the Cumberland Plateau in Tennessee. It's not if, it's when the New Modern Faults really goes haywire, and we are going to be a focal point for people exiting that area. We already have many supply stations set up, but I don't think anybody really fathoms how great it's going to be, and that's why I'd like to bring this forth to the EMA and start turning our attention to that type of an exercise so we won't get caught blindsided.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I might make the comment, a lot of things are not happening because of the COVID-19 thing. That is not a reason not to have your drills. You can modify your drills so you're working from home or whatever. Your drills should still be going on for disaster purposes. Disasters happen with COVID-19 or not. Might as well be prepared for them.
Yeah, well, we do that. I'm an Army Mars member. We use free conference call. We do presentations, PowerPoint, all of that, and like this Zoom. So it's not impossible. He sent out an email last month that we're not going to have our local emergency planning committee meetings anymore because of the COVID. And I suggested to him, we can still keep viable with free conference call or Zoom, and we can still make connection and keep moving forward to protect our county.
Yes, a lot of people have been reluctant to move to the new media formats, but I tell you, the ones that do, is a lot of benefits here. Okay, I'm talking too much. And David, you go ahead and.
I just wanted to jump back in on that, and that is that incidents don't happen serially. They can happen in parallel.
As we found out in 2020.
And we're going to find out in 2021.
I
Yes.
think you're right. I think you're right. Okay, David, take it away.
Dan, I was going to follow up on my earlier comments. We did one last October statewide in Wyoming. We did it in conjunction. It wasn't the day of, but of the great shakeout. And we did an earthquake scenario in Casper, Wyoming. And I wound up building the exercise just because I've been really working hard between the hams and our other coordinators in the state. And when you're talking COVID, hey, when it comes to communications, you don't have to be together to communicate. So it's one of those things of, remember, communications exercise may be the only exercise that's available on some of this for the coordinators. But we did it, and we used what's called the lifelines, which is a new FEMA construct that is used to evaluate how badly impacted a jurisdiction is, and how many of your lifelines have been compromised and so forth. And what we did then is we had every county coordinator provide the status of the lifelines in their counties, which is basically there's 7 items that they could rate. If any of them were compromised, that we had them communicate that to the local hams, who then passed it up through the net. We do nets anyhow statewide. All we did was use a net and transmit the information, but it was fascinating. We had people who have not been able to get their coordinator to even acknowledge emails or answer phone calls. The coordinators wanted to play because they got a free exercise out of it. And we built some bridges out of that one between the hams and the coordinators in ways that we've been working for the last 10 years trying to overcome. And in this case, it worked where they actually got a hold of the hams and asked if they could participate because they were going to get exercise credit. And it's amazing how that, one day's play, it took a little while to put it together and to make it HSEEP compliant. And when we talk about compliant exercises, they have to meet certain standards. The one thing is, remember, don't say we're going to have an exercise. Now, how do we do it? You should have your objectives, and some of what Gordon was talking about, you need to build it off of those objectives, your core capabilities and that, and then build out the exercise from it, rather than say, okay, let's have an exercise and now design it around it.
Thank you. If I had one thing to say to that, is that I wish I could clone what you guys are doing across the nation. We have some areas that are doing very, very well, and others that are struggling to make their areas groups and whatever organizations they're with work. That's another thing I'll touch on real quick before we catch John here. How many hats are you wearing? Your leadership in this and your leadership in that. Many people have many hats, and it feels good to be a part of all these organizations. But if you're leading it, who are you going to go to when a disaster happens? Who can count on you, and who's going to miss you? That's a biggie. So, if you are, for example, we use Aries. If you are EC in Aries or SEC, whatever, but you're very involved with that, and you're also involved in other organizations, get yourself an assistant. Get yourself somebody that can carry on when you can't be there. whether you're working with another organization or you're just part of the victim, one of the victims, you need to have that assistance so that people can count on continuity with what you got working for you to work when you're not there. Okay, enough of my gab. John?
Dan, I just wanted to add to that, Dan. I just wanted to add to that. When the poop hits the prop, will you be able to go? Or do you need to take care of yourself and your family and your neighbors? And what's your backup?
Yes, this is true. Another thing I keep hearing is all disasters are local. That is true. And if you happen to be in that local disaster, you are a victim often. So now you got to rely upon your neighbors. So work with your neighbors, drill with your neighbors, so everybody gets to know each other, your capabilities and where things are. Okay, John, go ahead and pick it up there.
Yeah, following up on the HSEEP compliant exercises, I've been in two that were compliant. Major full functional exercise on the West Coast, 2016 Cascadia Rising, and then in 2019 one was called SWIFT 19 South Whidbey Island Fault Earthquake Exercise, and they were both HSEEP compliant exercises. I've been trying until recently. I was with the Red Cross and was their training and exercise guy for this area, and tried to incorporate that process into our exercise planning. And it really makes a difference in how useful the exercise is, to have that pre-planning, to have the measles, to have all that stuff laid out ahead of time. It really makes a big difference. It does take a lot of advanced legwork to make it happen, but I really see a big difference between that and what has become in the last couple of years our county's approach to the quarterly statewide exercises, which is the day before somebody says, "Oh yeah, we got an exercise. We'll be on the air. Everybody just do something," and that's a waste of everybody's time. You really got to have those objectives figured out ahead of time, and what you're going to do to meet those objectives, and how you're going to measure success, and plan it out ahead of time. It takes a whole lot of effort, but it makes a big, big difference.
You know, I made a comment a while ago about clothing that person in the area he's working with. We need a lot of the places, especially if you live in an area that doesn't have many disasters, or none at all, it seems. Idaho is one of those, Montana's another. They just go along without their tornadoes or floods. And so we don't have the preparedness, or don't have the awareness that other sections and states do. That's why I like to see more and more incorporation, people working together on drills and such, so we can get everybody up to the same speed. That's just my 2 cents worth. Gordon, do you have more here to talk? I've been taking your show.
No, I'm just delighted to see the discussion. I'm part of multiple different disaster groups, and I'm careful not to take the top leadership role in all of them, because I can't do that. I won't be there. So you do have to pick, but I mean, they all need to work with each other. That's the key. And gluing the different groups in my state together has been one of my goals, so that communicators are going to be on the same radios. They all know how various things work, and they can help each other out. And the more you glue these groups together with folks like us, the better it is.
Agree with you 100% there. Most of you know, are aware that the Red Cross is doing a Thursday Windlink thing where they drill and such, and I don't know, they got about 900 people involved now, and those kind of things are really good too. So, and I like to see that being done by the FEMA folks and other people as well. I like to see the hams get active with the organization, so they know who they are, and what they can do.
It's about 1,500 people now.
Good. They're having fun learning something and learning to work together. One thing about this Zoom thing, I've been able to meet people I would have never met otherwise. And that's the same thing that happens when you broaden these drills out. You get to work with people, and you know where your resources are. Okay, is there anything else?
We're good in chat.
I think it was a great presentation. I think we all learned a lot.
I might make a comment about Barry's earlier comment about we do two of these things a week. On Wednesday, we try to do the general amateur radio stuff. You know, facing satellites, whatever it can be, building equipment. And on Thursday, we try to aim it towards the areas and disaster communications. And we really need double that because we're getting more. There's just so many things to talk on. Uh, it's just hard to get everything out there we need. So if you got a priority, something you want to hear about, or something we don't even know about, we should be hearing about, please let us know. That's what we can put these presentations together. We can get the speakers. We got great speakers. Gordon's great tonight. There's other people you've heard on here, very knowledgeable people, very good for us all. So I really recommend that you keep us in tone to what your needs are. Okay, Dan, you got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. When I first stumbled across the acronym HSEEP, I kind of went, oh no, what is this bureaucratic thing? Then I started looking at it and I realized it's something that in a functioning corporation or government agency, it's something that should be happening on a continuous basis where you get together with your people and you talk about what your mission is. I used to hold a staff meeting every Tuesday morning with no set time length. And it was just to see what was going on and what everybody thought about the best ways to solve problems any of us had. And all I did was insist on and coordinate these meetings. And I learned way, way more than I could have any other way about what was actually going on and all the various tentacles of the networks that I was managing. And this is the same thing. It's not, and when you look at the templates, it's intimidating as could be. But when you break it down into what you're doing and you realize that you're just doing recurring exercises to identify and remediate flaws and failures in what your mission is, all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense. And also looking around at the EMAs in the counties that I deal with here in California, I think they would be very happy if someone took the trouble to actually, and they changed the glossary for HSEEP not very long ago, like just months. But there's no such thing as HSEEP compliant anymore. They call it HSEEP conforming for, exercise and an evaluation program. And if you do anything like that with any EMA, just the fact that you're doing it and they can take credit for it because they're probably not doing it in some of the more rural counties around here where they don't have the staffing to figure this stuff out. That's how you're going to develop the relationships that you can then use to actually do what Aries is all about. So thanks for surfacing this again. I know you've done it before. And I think the more we break this down so it's simply digested and people appreciate it without getting intimidated by the bureaucratic language in their templates, the better off everybody will do with what they're trying to accomplish locally in their smallest groups. So there you go. I'm just saying thanks.
All right. Sounds good, Dan. Sounds real good. I might make a suggestion or an offer or whatever, as long as we get everybody together here. What the Red Cross did was a group will borrow your repeater. They borrowed our groups IO, our Aries our SEC Aries group to set themselves up. And then they moved off on their own. They still use ours, but that's how they got themselves started. I would love to see FEMA or somebody, another group, do a similar thing, get their hands involved, get them going like the Red Cross did. It's a great way to train, to be on the same page and get to know who's got what where, share ideas. So if any of you have that or have a resource to have somebody contact me on that, let me know and we can get that set up and going. I'd love to help that something like that happen. Dan, you still got your hand up. You still got more?
I put it back up. It's about the Red Cross. It's wonderful. What they did is they stole the concept of WinLink Wednesdays and the NorCal weekly WinLink check-in net, and they elaborated on it for their own purposes And in the space of less than a year, they now have a force of apparently 1,500 individuals whom they know where they are. They, I don't think, need to be, quote, Red Cross volunteers. And they are capable of, or soon will be, using WinLink to convey Red Cross messaging when the Red Cross's normal communication systems aren't working. So that was the perfect revolution in my mind about what they've accomplished. And I kudos to them for sticking with it and making it happen.
There's a,
It's even better, Dan. They disavow all knowledge.
oh, there you are.
They're keeping arm's length, and they're leaving. They're just.
Well, I envision something like that between Aries and the ARRL before we're done.
I sure hope so, folks. We're still ironing out the things ARL wants to do. Let's break for a second here. Do you have anything? This is Gordon's show, so I don't want to take it from Gordon.
Doing great.
I just have a quick comment, Dan.
Go ahead and say again, Barry.
We need to stress, and Gordon brought this up, sometimes we can get very serious. If we're going to be doing these exercises, we need to do it, and we need to do it and have fun doing it. I mean, it's a serious intent and a serious objectives, but unless you're going to have fun, you're not going to enjoy doing it, and you're not going to come back and continue to do it. We need to make these and stress them and give the people something fun to do and let them participate in something. There was one exercise that we participated in that we would put into our radio room. The main room in the EOC was busy with the exercise, and we sat there for 3 hours and didn't do anything.
That's
and
not good.
they actually closed the Emergency Operations Center and forgot that we were even there. That wasn't fun, and our hams didn't want to come back and participate anymore.
That
So
happens.
get people to participate, and you got to give them something fun to do.
We always schedule the hot wash at noon, and we meet at a restaurant. Everybody finally gets something to eat and drink. And then we have a non-blaming kind of person run the hot wash. And people are just ecstatic that they got through it. And they all want to talk about what they learned and what they did. And they generally have a great time.
Yep. Without the great time, it's not going to happen.
Okay, Zeke, I think you've had your hand the longest. I'm not sure it's either you or David. I'll catch you, Dan. Go ahead, Zeke.
Well, excuse me. I just think that the more we bring this out to our public officials, regardless of the EMA, police department, sheriff's department, we have a setup in the local hospital. If we bring this forward to them and show them our assets and let them decide, we're not trying to push it off on you folks. This is what we have to offer, and this is what we would like to do to help you.
Well, as Gordon said earlier, all that it's all resourcing. It's getting you induced to them and vice versa. You need to get with your agencies and let them know who you are, and they'll start seeing the needs. They have the needs. They have the needs now. They just don't understand that they can get a lot of that things through amateur radio. It's an educational type of thing.
That's correct. And we have a new safety director and security director. She's a very young lady out of Orange County, California. First thing, I have 6 assistants, by the way. I'm not going to try and handle it all by myself. I got some very great expertise here. And we've split up our county in 4 quadrants. And we advise her, the thing you need to do, young lady, get your tech license. If we can't get there fast enough, you can actually get on the radio and start helping yourself. And this is the other theme we're trying to push forward, that get your tech license. We don't have to be there right on the spot like the EOC. It's going to take us time to get there, but you can get things started and you can get your information going before we're even there.
Yes, there's a lot to that. We had a forest fire up by our cabin here a while back, and it wasn't amateur radio. I had regular, what do you call them, GPS type handhelds. I gave them out to I have a bunch of them I use for work parties and such. During the forest fire, I gave them out to all the cabins, to the lodge, and all that stuff. And and gave some to the Forest Service. None of them had that before. And suddenly they had communications. They knew where people were, what they had for equipment, what they could and couldn't do, who was going to need help. Communications. And, you know, so whether it's amateur radio or something else, we got a valuable thing, this thing called communications. Make it known. Okay, David.
Well, I was going to suggest too, when you're talking exercises, they don't have to all be serious blood and guts and so forth. The zombie attacks are always popular with people. I mean, stop and look at some of these marathon road races and so forth. They're now doing the paintballs or the cover them with paint, that sort of stuff. People enjoy getting out of the ordinary. Our club had one that was planned for last summer, and then COVID did wind up biting it because we didn't want to have the picnic. But we were planning a Saturday picnic that in order to find the picnic, it was going to be a fox hunt. We were going to have the core group go out to one of the parks and be all set up. But in order to get to the picnic, you were going to have to find your way with the fox hunt. Those kinds of things, I mean, write that up. You do the fox hunt. Okay, what did we learn from it? There's got to be something we learned from it. Write it up as an exercise, put it into HSEEP compliance, invite your EM to the picnic, and you double dipped right there. So
Yes.
Enjoy it. It's a hobby, for God's sake.
Yes, enjoy. It is all supposed to be fun. What you hit upon there, that stuff you can also do during this this pandemic. This thing seems to be hanging on a lot longer than any of us want it to. And we're not getting things done because of it. So we can't do some of the things we did one-on-one. Those are all fun, but we can still do things. We can have a fox hunt with our cars, find out where things are, driving around, making those contacts. That's just one of many, many things. We've got to rethink how we're doing this so we keep ourselves engaged and prepared. It just helps us to be ready. Okay, Dan, I think I've held you off enough there.
Thanks. Yeah, so right now, and I want to be perfectly clear about something. There's 2,000 and some sections in ARIES, not sections, 2,000 and some groups or individual local ARIES units in the country. And right now, every one of them has going on right around them a emergency management deployment of rare proportions in terms of the vaccination campaign for COVID-19. And you want to be very careful not to cross any lines, but if you can sort of see what your local counties are doing for organizing the vaccination, the mass vaccination campaign, you're going to learn a whole lot about how emergency management works and doesn't work in the counties you do that in. And I've just been fascinated by it for a couple of reasons, not just because of this, but because I'm also on the reserve list for emergency medical workers in the county I live in, and getting job offers from adjacent counties to participate as an EMT at the vaccination clinics. So it's just fascinating to watch how that evolves, and it's instructional. I mean, it's way better than reading something in a textbook. You're there and you're watching how the people interact and what gets the work done and what doesn't get the work done, and where the fluff is and where the meat is, and the necessary organization and training efforts. And that's an education of itself. Okay, I'm done now.
Okay,
I've been done 20 years, but
okay. I might comment. I think it was back in the early 60s. They did that. They asked the HAMs to help them coordinate for the polio vaccinations. And we were all out there. That's how they knew where their trucks were, where their people were, where their needs were. And they asked us. Now they don't ask us, because those days, back then, we were primary on everybody's mind. We're not now. So we have to go be a little more aggressive and go back and say, hey, can we help you? And this is what we can do if you need it. Okay, I'm still blabbing away here. Tom, take it.
Thank you, sir. There are still things you can do even though you're you're moribund as to contact, we sent people out to find the gauging stations operated by the USGS in our county, because looking at them on a map is not the same as seeing the blasted antenna and the gauging house. And the idea was that we had gone and asked them, and we went and asked the Weather Service too, what's the consequence of one of these things going silent? And both agencies answered, we go blind. And during a major rain event, we can't have that happening. So we asked our people to plot us 2 different ways into each gauge that involved not crossing a low spot where you'd endanger the people, and where they could see the gauge so that they could say, okay, well, your gauge house is underwater. Is that helpful? You know, because when a gauge, you know, and the guys and gals having gone and found the gauges was a major plus, because they took pictures and everything, and the plotted routes they turned back are now in a document that people can get off the website and have with them, so that if they get tasked to do that, they've got the document. They know where to go, into what street, to the left, how many yards through the brambles, with the warning that says wear bramble resistant clothing, you know, and they'll be able to see the gauge and say, yeah, well, it got swept away, but here's how high the water is, you know, when the USGS really needs to know. And it was done as individuals. Nobody shared a car. Nobody showed up in the same place. They didn't even have to don their mask because they weren't meeting anybody. Apparently, they're smart enough to put these gauges where there aren't a lot of people so that they won't get messed with. And that was one example. And another is I went to various people's homes, especially the new people, and they watched from the porch or the front window as I set up one of those camouflage mask type masks that one individual can throw up to a height of 20 feet. And I just showed them how I did it. And I said, you know, I really think, even though I'm quite tall, that anybody can do this. So the next time we have the hospital net, which is HF, do this. Take this antenna kit and this pole set, put them up in your backyard, using your vertical incident skywave propagation, check into the net, and then see what you can do right here at your house. Well, you know, almost half of those people checked in right there at their house, and the deputy section emergency coordinator was stunned by the leap in participation. But I gave them something to do. And by giving them something to do, even though I didn't want them together, I didn't want them within 15, 20 feet of each other if I could help it, they still had something to do.
I might make a comment here. Look around. Look at all these people here. We've gone down. We got 59. We did have a little over 100. We have 2 problems right now. One is we can't get together because of COVID, and the other is look around. Most everybody's up in age. We need to get young people involved with this thing, and that's going to be us involved. We're going to have something they want to be involved with. And there I go back to asking that we get not only involved locally, but nationally, working with each other, doing a Wind Link, doing a hot HF, whatever. Let's have some fun and make it something that these young people want to come to. You know, we can lecture them all day, but they got to see it. They got to feel it. And we can do that. We have to, if you create enthusiasm, enthusiasm creates itself. It's up to us. Okay, David, I've been holding you off here. Go ahead. Hello, David. That'd be wise.
Sorry, that I never got it lowered after the last time I was on.
Oh, okay. I'll lower it down for you. No big deal. Go ahead, Fred.
I just wanted to say, amen, Dan, that on several levels. One is I think we need to realize that the states have generally pretty much blown it in terms of COVID vaccination. They're not prepared to deal with the logistics of mass vaccination clinics. And it's deja vu polio. And somehow or another, we have a contribution to make. And we need to be able to step back from that a bit, even to the point of handing FRS and GMRS radios to civilians to help direct traffic, or, you know, how do you do a mass vaccination clinic with 1,500, 2,000 people a day in their cars? doing drive-up clinics. We have to think about how we can make solutions, and that's the real crisis in the community right now. But I'm sorry, but we have to also realize that we're under Department of Homeland Security is concerned about security of government and infrastructure, both from the left and from the right. And we have to be ready to step in for that too. I'm sorry, but these are difficult times.
It is very difficult, and I don't care where you're from, what your beliefs are, what your gender is, or anything else. We've got to start working together, and us as hams can be. We've always done it. We've worked together. We just sit down any differences we have and make it work, and we can do it and set the example. And we've got to find ways to do it. Be inventive. Create something. Get out your 9 dots. Again, if we can help you through the stuff that we do to make something you idea you have to work, let's do it. But we got to start doing something different to make something work. Zeke, your hand
Thank you,
back
Dan.
up. Zeke? I thought I lowered your hand. Did you raise it again, Zeke?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. This is why I sent a letter to the governor of Tennessee. After 30 years in uniform, I said, you need to call on your National Guard medical units. They are trained to deal with mass CAS, and this is what they need to do. And that, in the end, is going to help us, which will help them. That's all. That's all I have for now.
It's the same thing for them. Those National Guard guys like to feel needed and wanted and so forth. I don't care who you belong to, what group you are, just being around to be available is not fun. So get people involved. But getting back to amateur radio, we have to get ourselves more involved. We have to find ways, and I'm just challenging all of you. Reach out, find ways of doing it. And if we can help that happen, so be it. All right, Barry, is anything going on in chat?
Nope, everything is good in chat.
Okay, I'm going to wrap this up and start. I have to massage the video and get it all prepared and all the documents, and that will hopefully be out to you guys tomorrow morning sometime. So if there's nothing else, I want to thank Gordon for his presentation. He did a great job as usual.
Thanks everybody for your participation.
Oh,
Thanks, Gordon.
just putting your name out there. You're so well known between everything you've been involved with, it gets people. So if we can just use your name now and then. Okay, folks. Any
Thank
other
you.